Okay, today the video is finally here, how to install your crankshaft into your engine block. As usual, this is my K24. You saw how to choose your bearings, you saw how to assemble your pistons with your rods, and now finally you're going to learn how to install those bearings into your engine block, and then install your crankshaft, and then finally install your piston and rod assembly. After that, you will completely know how to assemble the bottom end of an engine. Today let's focus on installing the crankshaft and the bearings. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you what we're dealing with. Alright, so here's the KA that you have all come to know and love. This is obviously the top to install the crankshaft. We're going to have to get to the bottom. So let's flip this over real quick. Alright, so this is the bottom of the KA. You already know that the bearings go in here. So to install the bearings, it's very simple. Way simpler than you would think. You literally just push the bearings into these slots and that's it. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to double check. Before you install your bearings, make sure that all of these surfaces are nice and clean. You don't want any dirt, debris, chunks of flesh, or etc. in here. If you do have chunks of flesh or other various foreign objects in here, please remove them at this time and to make sure it is nice and clean. Alright, now that it's all clean, installing the bearings is really simple, like I said. Just get your bearing. You will notice that there is a little lip on one side of the bearing, the other side doesn't have that lip. That lip coincides with a groove on the journals, and you'll notice there's a groove on one side and the other side of the journals is straight. This little lip has to go into that groove, so just make sure you're doing that, and make sure you line up this oiling hole with the oiling holes that are on your block. And if you line up this lip with the groove, you really don't have to worry about anything else. So I put that in first, the side with the groove, and then just kind of push the other side in. Okay, push it down, make sure everything's okay, and that's it. Now another thing I like to do, get the butt end of a screwdriver and lightly tap on the edge. Okay, don't tap on the bearing, but tap on the very edge of this surface right here and the other side, and that will make sure that this bearing surface is flat with this journal surface. Okay, and do that for every bearing until you have them all installed. Alright, so now you have your bearings installed. Installing them into the girdle is the same exact process. You'll notice when you buy your bearings, one set of them will have this groove in it, okay? And the other half will be like completely smooth. The side with the groove goes into the block on the KA, and the smooth side goes into the girdle. Just make sure you have that in check too before you install it. And like I said, installing these into the girdle is the same exact process. One thing to look out for, if you are running graded bearings, make sure you keep them in track. So if you have a grade 2 bearing, it's going to come in 2 halves. So make sure you keep the grade 2 halves together. Just make sure you keep track of it so that you don't accidentally put like a grade 2 bearing on this side and then a grade 3 bearing on this side on the girdle. Make sure you keep track of that. That stuff is important. Alright, so we have the bearings into the block, and now we literally just have to put the crankshaft in, which is another simple task, but it's one of these things where you have to be really careful when you do it. So let me grab the crankshaft and we'll install it. Okay, before we put the crankshaft in, you want to use some engine assembly lube and put it on all these bearing surfaces. This way you won't scratch up anything by accident. So just put a little bit on each bearing. Whoa. On the thrust bearing, get some on the sides too, because the crankshaft actually does contact this on the sides as well. Now that you have all of these lubed up, we can put the crankshaft in. Now, one thing to make sure of, it's kind of a hard mistake to make, but just watch out for it. This is the front of the engine. Make sure the timing chain sprocket goes on the front of the engine. It's one of those mistakes that's hard to make, but it is possible to mix that up. So, get your crankshaft, very slowly and carefully, put it in here. Okay, don't just drop it in. Be really gentle. Okay, and now your crankshaft is installed. Now what we have to do is get the girdle and put it on top of this and then torque it all down. Okay, first step to doing this, like we did with the journals on the block, you need to put assembly lube on all these bearings. So I'm going to go ahead and do that before I do anything else. Okay, after you have the assembly lube on there, we just need to put the girdle on the crankshaft properly. Alright, on the girdle, when you flip it over, you'll notice that one side kind of curves in. The side that curves in goes towards the back of the crankshaft, of the engine. So slowly just put the girdle on like that. Again, make sure this part that gets smaller, curves in, goes towards the back. Okay? Now the girdle is sitting in there, okay? It's gonna need to be torqued down to, pull it down to the block. These are the bolts that I got. The main crankshaft main bolts. These are just regular Nissan ones. If you're going with stock bolts, make sure you buy new ones because these are made to stress and stretch, and so you can't reuse them. If you're using ARP hardware, just go with whatever ARP says to do. I know that their torque values are different than what the OEM specs are, so just make sure you follow ARP's instructions if you use their hardware. I'm using stock hardware for these main studs, so I'm going with the stock 40 foot-pounds. The factory service manual says to tighten these down in 3 stages, so I just divided 40 by 3 and you kind of get an odd number. But the first stage I'm going to do is 13 foot-pounds, then I'm going to move up to 25 foot-pounds, and then you're going to do our final torque of 40 foot-pounds. And you can easily get the factory service manual online and see for yourself what kind of values they want. So let's put these bolts in and then we can start torquing things down. Okay, when you ordered these main bolts from Nissan, you'll notice that 3 of them have a different part number than the others. That's because 3 of these are longer, and I'll put these part numbers in the video description so you can easily know what to get. Anyway, these 3 long bolts go here, here, and here. You just put those in. Okay, and just kind of hand thread them in a little bit. If you notice that these bolts are hard to tighten by hand, just gently tap the girdle with like a rubber mallet until you can turn them easily. I know this girdle doesn't have anything to align it, so you have to do it manually. So kind of just tap it until you can easily put these bolts in. When it's in a certain position, all the bolts will easily thread in by hand. Now after you have these 3 bolts in, you'll have 7 bolts that are the same size. Go ahead and put those in. These are 17mm bolts. Kind of tighten them all the way down by hand before you grab your torque wrench. These bolts are actually going to pull the girdle down, so make sure the girdle is all the way pulled down before you actually torque it, because that will affect your torque value. So what I'm going to do is just tighten these 2 middle bolts down a little bit until the girdle is all the way down, touching the block. And if you look at this face, you can see the gap slowly decreasing. When that gap is gone, then your girdle is touching the block and you can begin torquing. After you have that done, go ahead and grab your torque wrench, set it to 13 foot-pounds, and we're going to tighten these in a sequence. Okay, sequence is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you're basically tightening from the inside out in the star pattern. So go ahead and start with this one, 13 foot-pounds. Now move up to about 25 foot-pounds. Really 26.66 is what you want, but most torque wrenches won't do that for you. So just go up to 25. Same star pattern, tighten it down. Okay, now you do your final torque of 40 foot-pounds. Same star pattern. Alright, now your crankshaft is torqued in, and it should spin freely. If it doesn't, then your torque is way too tight. You can see I'm moving it with my hand pretty easily. And if you can't do that, just double check all your torque settings. Use a really good torque wrench, because this is kind of important. I used a Craftsman torque wrench, so there's probably not going to be any problems there. I wouldn't use Harbor Freight or things like that for these bottom end torque values. Okay, so that's it for the video for today. We're already at like 13 minutes and you already know how to install your crankshaft. I'm going to upload the next part of it, which is going to be installing the rods and pistons onto your crank, which involves, you know, putting your rings on and using a ring compressor. But after that, the bottom end videos will be done and you can build something cool. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Thanks for all the continued support, even though I'm really slow with these videos. And again, email me if you have any questions. Go to the Project Garage Facebook page, or the group rather, which is kind of like a forum. You can post a question up there. There's about like 50 or 60 other people on there, so you know, you're not only going to get my insight, but you'll get a lot of other people with their own experiences to help you out. So go ahead, check that out, and if you have any specific questions, just either email me or go to the Project Garage Facebook group. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.